The story kicks off when a giant egg-like object is discovered, brought in from the sea. A group of young people find themselves stranded on a strange seashore, where they soon realize that they need to escape this mysterious sand. Anyone who touches the sand is pulled under, as if it's alive and hungry. It all begins with a big group of friends gathering to party on a remote beach near Las Vegas, far away from the city. They're having a great time, dancing to loud music, and that's when they spot a huge, unusual object on the shore. The strange sight catches them off guard, but they brush it off and continue their night of partying. As morning arrives, the party begins to wind down. Most of the crowd leaves, but a few young people stay behind after the long night. Among them are Kylie and Mitch, who wake up on a lifeguard tower. They decide it's time to head home. Just as they start to climb down, Kylie notices a small bird struggling on the sand. To her shock, she watches as the sand pulls the bird under, swallowing it whole within seconds. Soon, the others in the group start waking up. Chanda sees that her friend Marcia is still asleep on a wooden table nearby. Not wanting to leave without her, Chanda tries to wake Marcia up, and Marcia slowly comes to. As Marcia gets ready to step off the table, Kylie shouts to warn her, sensing something wrong with the sand. But Marcia doesn't listen. The moment she steps onto the sand, her feet are suddenly stuck, as if something beneath the ground has grabbed hold of her. Marcia is baffled and tries to pull herself free, using her hands to push against the ground, but this only makes things worse. She begins to panic, screaming as she realizes the sand is pulling her down, slowly melting her as it devours her. The rest of the group watches in horror, realizing they're facing something far beyond their understanding. Seeing his friend in trouble, Vance decides to get out of the vehicle to help him. But as soon as he steps onto the sand to get closer, he falls and instantly becomes stuck. The rest of the group watches in horror, desperate to figure out a way to save him. They feel the tension building as they're unsure what's going on or how they can help. Meanwhile, Vance reaches out his hand, and someone tosses a stick for him to grab. But Vance can barely move, and moments later, his face starts to melt into the sand. The group watches in terror as Vance is pulled under, disappearing completely. Shaken by what they just saw, they try to make sense of it all, wondering what could be lurking beneath the sand and how they can escape. In a panic, Ronnie speculates that the sand might be affected by some radioactive waste from government experiments. He wonders if the chemicals have created a reaction in the ocean floor. But Zone isn't convinced and suggests that maybe it's a freak accident, like some kind of deadly chemical in the sand that's reacting to human skin. Zone thinks if they could somehow dig through it, they might be able to pull Vance out. Chanda suggests they try calling the police to come and help them. Unfortunately, all the phones were left in the trunk of the car. Mitch admits he had drained the car battery by leaving the headlights on all night, so the phones are stuck there. Hoping to get a closer look, Kylie steps to the edge of the stairs and cautiously reaches her hand out toward the sand. As her hand gets close, she sees hundreds of small, writhing tentacles hiding just beneath the surface. The tentacles instantly reach out, ready to pull in anything that comes close. The group realizes they're up against something far more sinister than they'd ever imagined. Meanwhile, Gilbert wakes up feeling disoriented and realizes he's trapped in something that feels like a barrel, with an eerie image painted on its side. Seeing this disturbing sight, he becomes furious and yells at the group to help him get out of this strange object. He tries to pull himself out of the water but struggles, realizing that he could easily drown if he isn't careful. The others, worried for Gilbert's safety, try to warn him about what's happening around them. When Gilbert learns that two of their friends didn't make it, he's devastated and tries even harder to keep himself together. Mitch tries to reassure him by saying that the tide will rise in a few hours, which could lift Gilbert to safety. Mitch tells him to hang on, take care of himself, and wait for the tide to do the work. But later Kylie asks Mitch if the tide will really rise enough to help Gilbert escape. Mitch admits he just said it to give Gilbert hope and keep him calm, even though he's unsure if it'll actually happen. As the hours drag on, the group remains stuck on the strange seashore, stranded with no way to get back to their lifeboat. The sun blazes down on them, and they start to feel the burn, with no shelter or protection. Kyla checks through the supplies and finds a box of matches, which she decides to keep in case they face a truly dire situation. She also finds a bit of sunscreen and quickly shares it with the friends trapped in the vehicle, hoping it will protect them from the harsh sunlight. As they try to piece together what's happening, Kyla remembers the events from the night before. She points out that everyone had set up on the seabed, but now it seems that the sand has swallowed most of the partygoers, leaving only a few of them behind. Looking around, they notice that the only things left are scattered pieces of their belongings. Everything else, and everyone else, has been taken by the sand. John hands Gilbert some sunscreen to help with his constant sunburn, as he's stuck in getting scorched over and over. Kyla looks out over the sandy seabed and recalls how the strange, massive object that Vance and Gilbert brought last night has now been completely destroyed. Seeing this, the group starts to realize that it may have been some kind of foreign egg, something mysterious that came out while they were all asleep. Frustrated, Gilbert starts rocking back and forth in the barrel, trying to shake off his anger. Kyla calms him down, explaining that whatever creature was in that egg hasn't fully grown yet. This means they still have a chance to survive if they can figure out how far the creature can reach. Thinking fast, Kyla grabs a packet of sausages and tosses one onto the sand. The moment it touches the ground, the sand quickly swallows it whole. Kyla suggests they keep throwing sausages to test the creature's reach, hoping to find a safe zone just beyond its grasp. Mitch tries tossing another sausage, but just as it hits the ground, a seagull swoops down, grabs it, and devours it right in front of Gilbert, who's irritated since he hasn't had anything to eat. Gilbert asks them to try throwing the last sausage in a different direction. When they do, they finally spot the point where the creature's tentacles can't reach. Relieved by this small victory, everyone feels a bit of hope for the first time. However, Chanda quickly reminds them that it doesn't make much difference. That safe spot is still too far away, and there's no clear path to reach it without stepping on the dangerous sand. Frustrated, she points out that they have no easy way out and feels trapped. Just then Zone comes up with an idea. He finds a surfboard from their supplies, suggesting they can use it as a platform to carefully make their way across the sand. With this plan, they start to see a slim chance of escaping the creature's reach. Slowly Zone makes his way toward the wooden table. But as soon as he steps onto the bench, one of the boards begins to slip, tilting dangerously over the sand. The group's hearts sink as they watch the creature's tentacles creeping closer to Zone, ready to latch onto him. Zone screams in pain, desperately trying to free himself, then summons all his strength and leaps, managing to grab onto the table just in time. However, in the process, he sustains a deep wound on his stomach, forcing him to lie down in agony. The group gathers around, trying to help Zone calm down. After a few tense minutes, he manages to pull himself up and checks through a nearby bag. Inside, he finds a large stash of food. As he's gathering it all up, a banana slips out of his grasp and lands on the ground. When he bends down to pick it up, he has an idea. Maybe he can toss some food to the others to help them stay strong. John, noticing this, decides to take a risk as well. He carefully steps forward, preparing to toss some food toward his friends. But just as he's about to throw a piece to Mitch, he feels a sharp pain from his own injuries, and he stumbles. The can he was holding slips from his grip and falls to the ground. The pain in Zone's wound intensifies, causing him to double over, eventually collapsing onto the table. The situation spirals further out of control. The sand creature's tentacles move quickly, pushing the boards aside and surrounding Zone. At the same time, other tentacles wrap around the vehicle, puncturing all its tires, effectively trapping the group. With escape seeming impossible, Mitch suggests that if they can somehow get to a cell phone, they could call for help. Chanda quickly turns to Ronnie, asking him to try carefully opening the car's trunk, where the phones were left. Ronnie steadies himself, leaning on the car's bumper while managing to unlock the trunk. But each time he tries to open it fully, the trunk lid slips from his grip and slams shut, blocking access. The group feels trapped and helpless as the sand creature's grip tightens. The suspense builds, and they know they're running out of time. Just as hope seems to fade, Kyla's mind races for another plan, desperately searching for any idea that might save them. Kyla hands the lifeguard hook to Ronnie, hoping he can use it to grab something from the trunk. With a deep breath, Ronnie tries again, and this time he manages to open it. Just then, a police car pulls up nearby. The officer gets out and angrily tells everyone to stop messing around, saying that the beach is closed. Kyla quickly tries to explain that there's a dangerous creature lurking under the sand and pleads with the officer to stay in the car, insisting it's the only way to keep him safe. Gilbert joins in, urging the officer to call the National Guard because whatever is beneath the surface could be a serious threat to the environment. Unfortunately, the officer dismisses their warnings, believing that the young people are just high on chemicals. He walks away from the car, ignoring their concerns. As he strolls around the area, the creature's tentacles sneak up behind him, trying to grab him. It struggles to free him, but the weight of the barrel makes it impossible. Realizing he can't help the others, he calls out to Kyla and Mitch, telling them to come down from the lifeguard station so they can explain what's happening. Kyla tries to describe the dire situation, saying that some of their friends are injured and others are in bad shape. She insists they need to get out of there quickly. Despite their pleas, the officer orders them to approach him, but Kyla and Mitch refuse to step onto the dangerous sand. Losing his patience, the officer pulls out a can of pepper spray, threatening to use it to force them to come over. The tension rises as everyone realizes they are caught between the creature and the stubborn officer, with danger closing in on all sides. While the officer bends down to pick up something he dropped, he steps onto the sand. Suddenly, tentacles shoot out and grab his arm, pulling him down into the ground. He struggles to break free and sprays the sand with his chili spray, managing to escape for a moment. But it's already too late. The creature has completely swallowed his hand. All he can do is scream in pain as the horror unfolds before everyone's eyes. The group is devastated, realizing that the officer didn't believe them when they tried to warn him. Seeing this, Kyla rushes to the end of the ladder, grabs the chili spray, and decides to leave the officer behind, letting the creature take him. Now armed with a new weapon, she tells Mitch they need to hurry. He asks Chanda to throw him a towel to help him reach them. But just as Mitch reaches out to catch it, a piece of the railing breaks away, and he falls from the cabin, landing in the sand. Hatash screams for Mitch's help, panicking as he says he can't feel any part of his body. Unfortunately, no one can reach him in time. The sand traps Mitch completely, and moments later, tentacles snake into his throat, stopping him from moving. Within seconds, Mitch's body is destroyed by the creature, leaving behind only a large bloodstain on the sand. Kyla realizes that if they stay in this place any longer, no one else will survive. Determined to find a way out, she calms her friends and tells them they need a new plan to escape. She quickly rips off another piece of the railing and throws it aside. Shonda gathers the supplies on the hood of the vehicle, and then she jumps in, rushing to free Ronnie. She manages to untie him and quickly wraps his injured hand with a cloth, telling him that they'll get him to safety as soon as they can reach the barrel. Together they start to prepare for their escape, hoping to outsmart the creature before it's too late. The three of them know they just have to wait. They carefully place a log on the sand and use it to balance themselves as they make their way toward where Zone is trapped. As they navigate the path, the last woman crosses over a brown patch of sand. Midway, she realizes she's losing a lot of blood and feels weak. Her balance falters, and she falls to the ground. When she hits the sand, despite Kyla's attempts to save her friend with the pepper spray, the creature's tentacles quickly reach out and grab Ronnie, pulling him under the sand. Now, there are only 4 survivors left, and they must stick to their escape plan. Shonda wraps feet with the towel soaked in pepper spray, hoping it will help her run toward the vehicle. But just when they think they might get away, Gilbert is completely swallowed by the tentacles, which drag her down to the seabed. Shonda, filled with fear and despair, cries out for her friend. The creature takes advantage of her distraction and attacks the vehicle, knocking Shonda out as she falls onto the hood. Now, Kyla, Mitch, and Chanda are trapped on the beach. After a moment, Kyla manages to wake Shonda up. Once she's alert, Chanda finds a lifeboat nearby. She throws it onto the sand, intending to fill it with anything she can use as a bench to help them move on the ground. Soon, she reaches the area where Kyla and the others are, and with the lifeboat, she helps bring Zone back to the car. Zone is completely exhausted and weak from the pain of his injuries, but with their combined efforts, they know they need to keep pushing to escape this nightmare. Just as they were about to leave, a massive drum suddenly emerged from the ground, sending Kyla flying back to the spot where they had been. The vehicle became surrounded by a circle of ashes. Before the tentacles could launch their next attack, Kyla quickly grabbed the matchbox she had found earlier and struck a match, lighting the ashes. The flames engulfed the tentacles, setting them on fire, and as she watched the giant monster being destroyed, Kyla rushed back to the vehicle. Inside, she and the others struggled to protect themselves from the countless glowing candles that continued to attack the car. After a few tense minutes, the creature finally retreated, leaving the young people alone. However, when they turned to check on Zone, they discovered he was no longer alive. The girls cried as they said goodbye to their last friend, feeling the weight of their loss. With no other options, they hugged each other tightly, trying to rest after such a long and terrifying day. In the morning, a person approached the vehicle and noticed that everyone inside was unconscious. He pointed at the window, which startled the girls awake. As they opened the door, they realized they could step on the sand without any problems. A wave of relief washed over them, and they quickly left the horrifying place behind. And with that suspenseful conclusion, the story comes to an end. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Bye bye.